The Forgotten Portrait. I always believed our Victorian home held secrets, but nothing prepared me for the chilling discovery in the attic. Amidst the dust-covered trinkets and faded journals, an old photograph caught my eye. It depicted a family eerily similar to mine, gathered around a grand oak table. Their faces, however, were contorted in unspeakable horror, as if frozen in a moment of sheer terror. The house was silent, save for the creaking of old wood that seemed to groan in protest with each step I took. I couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching me, tracing my every move. The air grew colder as I studied the photograph, the faces starting to look more familiar with each passing second. Whispers began to fill the room, soft and sibilant, like the rustling of leaves in a dead calm. I spun around, searching for the source, but found only shadows that seemed to dance just beyond the reach of the attic light. The whispers grew louder, urging me to look closer at the photograph. As I peered into the glassy eyes of the portrait's subjects, a sudden gust of wind slammed the attic door shut. I jumped, my heart racing, and when I looked back at the photo, I could swear I saw the father's eyes move, following me with a silent plea. I decided to delve deeper into the history of the house, hoping to uncover the truth behind the photograph. The local library held archives of the town's past, and there, buried in a leather-bound ledger, was the mention of a family tragedy that had occurred over a century ago, in this very house. The more I read, the more the room temperature seemed to drop, the words on the page blurring as if trying to escape their grim tale. It spoke of a family, prosperous and well-liked, who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only an empty home and whispers of dark rituals. As night fell, the house began to settle with ominous thuds and groans. I couldn't shake the feeling that the family from the photograph was reaching out from beyond, their terror transcending time and space. And as I prepared to leave the attic, a voice, clear and petrifying, whispered my name. The attic became my obsession. Each day, I climbed the narrow stairs, drawn by an inexplicable force. The photograph haunted my dreams, its subjects pleading for release. I needed answers, even if they led me deeper into the abyss. The town's elderly librarian, Mrs. Hawthorne, held the key. Her rheumy eyes widened when I mentioned the portrait. "Ah, the cursed family," she rasped, her bony fingers tracing invisible sigils in the air. "They dabbled in forbidden arts, you see." The photograph captured their final moments before they vanished. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. Vanished? How? Mrs. Hawthorne's gaze bore into mine. They summoned something beyond comprehension, a malevolent entity that fed on fear. The attic was its gateway. The family's terror fueled its existence. I shivered. And the whispers? "Echoes," she whispered. "The trapped souls of the family, forever warning others." I returned to the attic, armed with salt and sage. The air crackled as I circled the oak table, chanting incantations. Shadows writhed, and the photograph seemed to pulse. The father's eyes followed me, his mouth forming silent words. Then, the whispers intensified. They spoke of sacrifice, of a pact sealed in blood. The attic walls closed in, and I glimpsed the family's fate, their bodies contorted, limbs elongated, eyes replaced by voids. They had become vessels for the entity, their terror eternal. I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of old books. One fell open, revealing a crude drawing, a portal with jagged edges. The same portal from the photograph. The whispers grew louder, urging me to complete the ritual. I hesitated. What if I unleashed the entity upon the world? But the family's faces haunted me, their agony etched into my soul. I had to free them, even if it meant my own damnation. As the moon rose, I traced the portal's lines with trembling fingers. The attic trembled, and the photograph flared with an otherworldly light. The father's eyes bore into mine, and I whispered the final incantation. The room convulsed. The portal widened, revealing a void of infinite darkness. The family's screams echoed, merging with my own. I stepped through, my body twisting, my mind unraveling. And then, silence. The void swallowed me whole, and I emerged in a place beyond time. The family from the photograph awaited me, a grotesque tableau of suffering. their limbs elongated, their eyes hollow pits. The father, once stern, now writhed like a tortured worm. "Welcome," the mother hissed, her voice a blend of agony and malice. "You've come to complete the pact." I stumbled back, my skin crawling. "What pact?" The daughter, her face stretched into a mask of anguish, stepped forward. "We summoned the entity to protect our bloodline. It promised prosperity, but at a cost. And you paid that cost," I whispered, understanding dawning. "Your terror fed it." The son, skeletal and twisted, nodded. "We thought we'd control it. But it consumed us, body and soul." "Why me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why this photograph?" The father's eyes bore into mine. "You're our descendant, the last link. The entity craves your fear." I glanced at the portal, the gateway back to my world. "What if I refuse?" The mother's laughter echoed. "It's too late. You've already glimpsed our horror." The entity stirs. The walls trembled, and the attic materialized around us. The family's agony intensified, their forms flickering between human and monstrous. The entity slithered through the cracks, tendrils of darkness wrapping around my limbs. "You'll join us," the son rasped. "Forever." I fought, clawing at the air, but the entity tightened its grip. The whispers grew louder, merging with my own screams. The photograph flared, and I glimpsed my family, my wife, my children, frozen in terror. The father leaned close. "Embrace your fear. Feed the entity." I closed my eyes, remembering my daughter's laughter, my son's first steps. I couldn't let them suffer. With a final surge of will, I hurled myself toward the portal. The attic collapsed, reality folding in on itself. I tumbled through the void, my body twisting, my mind unraveling. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I stood in the attic once more. The photograph lay at my feet, its subjects frozen in horror. But now, my face stared back from the frame, twisted and contorted. The whispers resumed, urging me to complete the pact. The entity hungered, and my fear would sustain it. I had a choice, to save my family or doom them to this eternal nightmare. And so, I burned the photograph and pretended I didn't hear the whispers anymore. Story 2. The Unseen Cries. I had always believed our house harbored no secrets. It was just an old Victorian structure with creaking floors and drafty windows. That was until my daughter, Lily, began speaking of the child who cried in her closet. Every night, like clockwork, she would wake me with a trembling voice, "Daddy, the crying won't stop." Each time, I would check, finding nothing but the silence of her toys. The whispers started softly, almost imperceptibly, as if the house itself was breathing unease into our lives. Lily's behavior changed. She became withdrawn, her once bright eyes now shadowed with fear. I tried to console her, to assure her it was just her imagination, but the doubt crept into my own mind like a persistent chill. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky a morose shade of twilight, the crying began again. This time, it was louder, desperate. I rushed to Lily's room, my heart pounding against my ribs. I flung open the closet door, and there, amidst the stuffed animals and dolls, I saw it, a fleeting shadow, darting away into nothingness. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and eerie occurrences. Toys would move on their own, and the sound of soft lullabies would drift through the halls, with no discernible source. I started researching the house's history, uncovering tales of past residents whose lives were marred by tragedy and loss. As I delved deeper into the house's past, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air grew thick with anticipation, and the boundary between the living and the dead seemed to blur. Lily refused to sleep in her room, her whispers of the crying child growing more frantic. Tonight, I sit here, writing this account by the dim light of a single candle, the shadows dancing across the walls. The crying has started again, but this time, it's different. It's not coming from the closet, it's right behind me. The candle flickered, casting an eerie glow as I turned, expecting to confront the source of the sobs. But there was nothing, only the oppressive silence of the room. My heart raced, and I could feel the cold sweat on my brow. This house, with its hidden whispers and unseen tears, was testing my sanity. I began to hear it everywhere, the soft, mournful weeping of a child. It followed me like a specter, a sound only I seemed to hear. Lily clung to me, her small hands gripping mine with a strength born of fear. "Make it stop, Daddy," she pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. Determined to protect my daughter, I resolved to uncover the truth. I scoured the local library, digging through old newspapers and records. What I found chilled me to the bone. A century ago, a young boy had vanished without a trace, his last known cries heard from our very home. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, each more disturbing than the last. I learned of rituals and seances conducted by the grief-stricken mother, desperate to contact her lost son. Had she invited something into our home, something that never left? That night, as the wind howled outside, I set up a recorder in Lily's room, hoping to capture proof of the unexplained phenomena. The hours ticked by, each minute stretching into an eternity of anticipation. And then, amidst the static, a voice emerged, clear and unmistakable. "Why won't you play with me?" The next day, I played the recording for a local priest, seeking guidance. His face paled as he listened, and he agreed to perform a cleansing ritual. But as he chanted and sprinkled holy water, the air grew colder, the shadows darker, and the crying turned into a wail of anguish. As the priest fled, leaving us alone in the house, the realization dawned on me: we were not dealing with the spirit of a child. We were facing something far more sinister, something that fed on fear. And it had set its sights on Lily. The house was silent, a stark contrast to the cacophony of fear that had filled it just moments before. Lily's eyes, wide with fright, searched mine for reassurance. I held her close, whispering promises that I wasn't sure I could keep. The entity had revealed itself, not through sight, but through a presence that suffocated every room with dread. I knew we couldn't stay, but where could we go? The entity was tied to us, or so it seemed. I decided to contact a paranormal investigator, someone who could perhaps understand what we were facing. The investigator was an older man, his face etched with lines of experience. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving Lily. As night approached, he set up his equipment, cameras, and sensors in every corner of the house. We waited, the tension palpable. Then, as the clock struck midnight, the crying began anew. It was a sound that could turn one's blood to ice, a lament that spoke of eternal sorrow. The investigator motioned for us to stay back as he opened the closet door. The toys were scattered, as if thrown by unseen hands. He stepped inside, and the crying stopped abruptly. We heard him speak, a conversation with the void. "I know you're here," he said. "Reveal yourself." The temperature dropped, our breaths visible in the icy air. And then, a voice, different from the crying, a child's voice, filled with malice. "You're not my mommy," it hissed. The investigator stumbled out, his face pale, his equipment malfunctioning. He told us that the entity was not a child, but something that preyed on innocence, something that had found a perfect disguise. We needed to leave, he insisted. But as we packed our things, a realization struck me. The toys, they were not just toys. They were relics, each belonging to the lost children of the house's past. As we drove away, I looked back at the house, its windows dark like empty eyes. Lily was quiet, her hand in mine. But in the rearview mirror, I saw them, the children, standing in the window, their eyes pleading. And among them, a new face, Lily's favorite doll, its eyes now alive with a sinister gleam. The end. Subscribe for more. Thank you.